In the broad sweep of American horse-playing history, exotic betting is still in its relative infancy. For the first half of the 20th century, few tracks offered anything more exotic than the Daily Double, which really was just a promotional gimmick to ensure that patrons arrived in time for the first race of the day. Exactas, requiring you to pick the first two finishers in a race, really became widespread during the 1970s. The Pick Six, requiring you to pick 6 winners in a row, was introduced to most American tracks in the 1980s. But it really was in the 1990s that the exotic explosion occurred. Suddenly there were trifectas available on every race, and then superfectas, and now even a super high five, requiring you to pick the first 5 horses in order under the wire. 30 years ago, over 90% of the wagering on horse races was in the straight pools, the win, place, and show pools, sometimes called whips. Only 10% of the action then was on the exotics, a peculiar word to describe these bets, one used mostly as an adjective to describe the kind of dancing that strippers do. But today that's totally turned around. Now, over 70% of the $14 billion bet every year on horse racing is on these so-called exotics rather than on the whips. In 1973, when Secretariat won the Kentucky Derby, you could summarize the betting results of the race in 3 lines: win, place, and show. Well, by 2005, when Giacomo won the Kentucky Derby at odds of 50 to 1, those 3 lines of whips results were just the beginning of a long, long list of very high-priced mutual payoffs. The game had turned completely around. Derby Day still attracts more whips betting than any other day of the year because of all the casual and once-a-year fans and people who are there as much for the hats and the horses. But even on Derby Day, whips betting is now in a minority. In 2005, there was $97 million bet on the Kentucky Derby, but only $42 million of that was in the so-called straight pools. Exotics had become the majority.